Welcome back, my loves, to Rewriting Romance, modern dating with old school wisdom, a space where we blend faith, psychology, and feminine wisdom to redefine what healthy, intentional dating looks like in today's world. I'm super excited about today's episode because we're going to be really peeling back even more layers and diving in deeper on everything we've been discussing so far. And if you've been journeying along the series, you know that we've been carefully laying down the foundation that is rooted in faith, emotional clarity, and feminine confidence. Because we're really trying to redefine what dating should look like through intentionality and not fear, pressure, or desperation, but more of that spiritual alignment and through God's discernment, which we did touch upon on our last episode, and where we unpacked what true love is versus those red flags. We also talked about the quiet ways that discernment shows up, and that's through our Holy Spirit that is nudging us that something is off and we just brush it away, which we shouldn't, and why a person's fruit shows us so much more than any chemistry or charm that may show up initially. We also explored how the tensions between actions, motives, character, and consistency. We also walked through how control can disguise itself behind care, how chaos is not a sign of passion, and how God's love and definition of love sets the standard of how we should be evaluating all of the people that we're accepting into our lives and the relationships that we are in. So today, like I said, I want to keep peeling back the layers and diving in deeper because as we know, modern dating has really blurred and distorted and honestly complicated what dating should look like, and that's intentional, especially for a woman that is trying to date out of her femininity, her faith, and her standards. So what we're going to be unpacking today is what a healthy first date expectation should look like, why masculine and feminine roles are shifting and how to realign them, how situationships have become normalized and why we're stuck in them, and what are some characteristics that we should be looking for in our future husband, and how to date, obviously, with clarity, confidence, and, well, strategy, not manipulation or playing games. So let's be clear on that. And this will help us not waste years of our lives. So, ladies, let's grab our coffees, our journals, and let's dive right into it. All right, so let's start with first dates. Because a man communicates his intentions long before that first date. And it all comes down to how he's asking you to that first date. Is it a dinner? Is it a drink? Is it a coffee? Because yes, each one of them carries a different type of energy, a different type of intentions, a different type of posture towards you. And this part matters, not because you're judging the man, but because you're trying to see if that alignment aligns with what you're looking for, right? And to be honest, a coffee date is not bad, but it is neutral. It does say that I don't want to invest until I'm sure you're worth it. So it's the masculine version of saying that he's keeping his options open. Coffee dates attract the men that are testing the waters, avoiding that commitment, are protecting their ego, they're minimizing that effort, and they're staying in that convenient mode instead of that pursuit mode. It's that low risk, low investment, and low cost. And yes, it's become normalized. And normalizing things doesn't mean that he's masculine. Normal doesn't mean that it's intentional. And normal doesn't mean he sees you as the woman he wants to spend the rest of his life with or impress. So, what does a masculine man look like? Well, he's a leader. He's a man that is in that provider energy, is a man who's serious about establishing that momentum and that will step into that initiative. He's the one that plans something. He's the one that chooses the place. He'll create an environment where you can actually connect, not rush through a 20-minute high caffeine exchange. And a man who knows what they want, make their intentions very clear through their preparation and their presence. And this is where a lot of us women get stuck in, right? Because we've been conditioned to be chill, to be easygoing, to not ask for too much, and to not be high maintenance. But let me tell you something. It's not the low maintenance or the high maintenance aspect that will define if you're attracting that high quality man, but it's going to be your standards. Because if you're having those lower standards, it does start showing up in the aspect of you accepting that coffee date. What it is saying and what you're actually accepting is, I don't require leadership. I don't expect intentionality. I'm okay with being treated the same way that you treat every other girl that you're probably talking to. And I will say this with so much love. This is how women end up in a situationship instead of courtship. And we're wondering why. Well, we have low standards. Because the tone that you do allow at the beginning of that relationship is going to be the tone of the entire relationship, right? And that's something that we really uncovered on episode 3. And a masculine man wants to rise. A masculine man wants to pursue. A masculine man wants to put in the effort. But he will only rise to the level of that woman's standard. This is not about demanding extravagance. It's more about the discern effort. It's about recognizing the masculine clarity versus the masculine confusion. It's about honoring the version of you that knows that she is worth that pursuit. And most importantly, it's about trusting that the man that God has created for you is not intimidated by your standards. He actually will be activated by them. Okay, so recently I've gone out in a few dates. I started being on dating apps back in September. And my first Hinge date, well, first let's kind of back up. When we first matched, everything was flowing well. He was very direct, knew exactly what he wanted and what he was looking for. And I really liked that assertiveness, that directness, and that transparency. We later took it out of the app. We started to set that first date and everything flowed very well. But then on that first date, which was on a Sunday and it was brunch, which it was fine. That's what worked out for us. He did not order food. No. I ordered my food, of course, because I was starving, but he had already eaten. Like, what? So it was really awkward because I was eating my food while he was just having coffee. And I mean, we had great banter. Everything flowed very naturally, but obviously throughout the day, I was starting to pick up certain things that I'm like, I don't think this is the kind of man that I'm looking for and that we're aligned in certain aspects. He definitely started to give me certain feminine energy in certain things, and that made me kind of retreat and obviously didn't keep on pursuing that, and we just didn't align. So that was my first date. Now let's fast forward to today. This weekend I will have a date, so it is back-to-back date with the same person. I usually do not accept that just because I am busy and, we just don't want to be too available, which we discussed that on episode 4. But the intentionality of the way that he's showing up even before this first date is showing a lot. So we matched. He took the conversation out of the app after maybe a few days of talking because he was very direct. I like your energy. You're probably someone I would like to start pursuing. So what's your number? Okay, perfect. We started texting. He started to ask me about some dates and giving me a list of things. And he was very intentional about the date because he was picking up my interest. And we finally landed on a few things. He wanted a full date, but I don't have a full date to give him. So we kind of just broke it up into 2 days. I would not usually do that, as I stated before, but due to his line of work and his availability, that was the exception. He's in the medical field and his hours are not very consistent like mine. So I will work around that. And I also like the type of energy and pursuit that he's giving me. So that right there is already giving me a lot more masculine energy than that first initial date that I had, and everything in between that I've been, having from my first date to this date. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, I don't know the man, so we will plug into that godly discernment and see how this goes. But let's go ahead and shift gears now and discuss on the hot take, modern dating and role reversals. So everything else that I'm going to be touching on the rest of today's episode, I want you to put your pride aside and everything that you think that you know and listen with an open mind and an open heart, okay? Because I really want to speak from truth and discernment. As we know, we are living in a dating landscape where the roles have quietly but dramatically reversed. Want to accept it or not? Because men have become feminine, women have become masculine, and the results are showing up everywhere. And I'm not saying this out of my own opinion. This is something that we've all started to see and observe. And if we're out scrolling, we see a lot of those funny videos that, shows a female, why are you single in 2025? And then it's a snippet of men in 2025. And it's either pictures of very masculine men wearing like fairy costumes and princess costume, reflecting that feminine energy of modern men. And then, or you see the videos of women literally carrying luggage, or the babies or everything, while the men have nothing in their hands. They're on their phones. They're just walking behind the women while the woman is just carrying the whole load, literally, not just like metaphorically, which it just baffles me. And I'm like, this is the problem. So women are now in a place that don't want to date these, feminine energy type of men. And well, we'll keep diving in because men today want to be pursued. They want the comfort and not the commitment. They want the ease without the effort. They want that feminine energy without offering any masculine structure. They want the respect without demonstrating leadership. They want partnership without responsibility. So we've definitely entered the era of soft men, right? Men who avoid the pressure, the accountability, and the sacrifice. And then if we look at women today, they are carrying the entire ecosystem of the relationship. They're planning the dates, they're initiating the conversations, they're paying the bill, which we talk more on this in episode 3, that we should not be paying. It's the men, and that's their role. That's their provider energy. And I do to discuss it that it's not about, who has, the more power or whatever. It's more about that stewardship and that leadership and that discernment and that masculinity that God has created him to lead in, right? So we cannot be taking that away from them. driving the emotional connection. Women are also managing the pace, leading the spiritual atmosphere. So women are building the household emotionally, financially, spiritually, while men sit back and enjoy a dynamic they never earned because we've allowed that. We have set that standard for men, and we should not be okay with that. So here's even a deeper issue. We have confused self-sufficiency with role replacement, right? Women are told to be independent, to not need a man. You can do it all, right? And then men are told, relax, step back, chill. She will take the lead. She will make the move. Don't show desperation. That is a cultural lie that we have fallen victim to. That cultural shift did not empower women. It exhausted them. That cultural shift, it did not evolve men. It weakened them. And now both sides are frustrated, disconnected, and blaming one another when the real problem is that we have abandoned God's order. And that's the truth. That God design was never to be oppressive. And that is another cultural lie that we have gained to believe, that the Bible is old, that has old biblical truth, right? And that it is oppressing women. That is false. And those people saying that haven't really dived in and read the Bible. And then if they have and they're still saying that, you're reading it out of pride. You're reading it out of the enemy whispering in your ear, did God really say? So we need to step back out of our own pride and really listen and observe the biblical truth with an open mind and an open heart, right? Because men are called to provide, to protect, to lead, and to create structure. Women are called to nurture, to influence, to refine, and bring that emotional intelligence and balance into the relationship, right? It's not about who's more superior than the other. God created men and women to complement one another. A woman's influence doesn't diminish a man's authority. It enhances it. A man's leadership doesn't restrict a woman's power. It gives it a place to flourish. When divine design stands, attraction naturally flows. But when that divine design starts to collapse, connection collapses with it. And that's where we are today. All right? So let's look at the psychological truth behind it all. A woman that is embracing that masculine energy cannot receive love. It can only manage it. A man that is in that feminine energy cannot pursue the love. He can only respond to it, right? And that's why many relationships start to feel flat, confused, and without any direction. Because there's no polarity, no structure, no pursuit. There's no safety and there's no flow. We're not struggling because men and women changed. You know why we're struggling? We're struggling because the roles God designed got inverted, and now nobody knows where we stand. But here's the good news. We do have hope, right? Because when a woman starts to step back in her feminine identity and a man steps back into that masculine responsibility, everything really starts to fall more into line. It's that respect, that pursuit, that clarity, that stability, and that attraction, and that peace within the ecosystem of that relationship. Modern dating isn't failing because men and women are changing, but it's because men and women are misaligned. And alignment is what the entire conversation is about. So now let's step back and dissect this a little bit more. Why are we here? How did we get here? So let's go ahead and zoom out and talk about the last 60 years, because it is truly the compound effect of the last decades that we are here today. So this is obviously the result of those decades of that cultural shift that slowly chipped away the identity and the order and the pursuit. So if we go back to the 1960s, this is where the rejection of femininity begins. This is the era where women were told that femininity was weakness, that dependence was dangerous, that softness makes them less vulnerable. Women pursued empowerment, but the messaging taught them to disconnect from what really made them feminine in the first place, which was receiving, nurturing, influencing, and resting in that emotional intelligence. And what started as a liberation eventually became identity distortion. And then if we fast forward 10 years later, in the 1970s, where it's the free love dismantles commitment, right? So this is where the era of the love without boundaries starts, the sex without responsibility, the connection without covenant. This is the era that starts separating that intimacy from responsibility. It taught men to take without giving, and it taught women to give without being chosen. And it planted the seed for what we now call the casual relationships. And so then if we fast forward 10 years more to the 1980s, this is the me generation. Everything became about my wants, my needs, my pleasure, my freedom, my. Relationships shifted from partnership to self-focus. People stopped asking, what does God call me to be in this relationship? And start asking, what can I get out of this relationship? And this is where the individualism replaced that divine order. And this is where the foundation of the self-love era that we see today was implemented. And then if we go 10 years more to the 1990s, this is the rise of the hookup culture. This is where emotional connection started to lose its values. Just have fun, no strings attached, no expectation. Men learned that they could cross and access women without commitment. Women learned that vulnerability was unsafe. Both sides learned to detach. This was the beginning of the emotional shutdown as a norm. So now let's start looking in the early 2000s and 2010s. This is where women begin operating like men sexually. They were fueled by empowerment culture. Women were told, do what men do, detach like men, sleep like men, lead like men. But what wasn't explained was that women are not wired like men. Sex bonds a woman spiritually, emotionally, and biologically. So when women begin behaving like men sexually, the cost was a lot higher than we've expected. The anxiety, broken self-worth, emotional burnout, and spiritual fragment just went up, right? This is the era that created a woman with a masculine armor and a generation of men with feminine passivity. And then if we look into the 2020s, the dating apps, the instant access, and the emotional numbness era. Now, we're swiping through people like their product. There's no pursuit. There's no depth. There's no real investment. Men don't have to lead because an algorithm does it for them. Women don't have to utilize the discernment because the options distract from doing so. The instant gratifications replaces that intimacy, and the attention replaced that commitment. The validation replaced the connection. And here we are, the now, December of 2025, where nobody knows who's supposed to lead. Purpose is blurred, roles are blurred, expectations are blurred, Masculinity is questioned, femininity is mocked, commitment feels foreign, selfishness is normal. We're not confused because men and women changed. We're confused because culture has been disciplining us a lot louder than God has. And that is very scary, right? And here's the hope, though. If we start to really realign with God's design, those roles become clearer, the attraction starts flowing more naturally, and the relationship begins to thrive again. Okay? So let's stop doom scrolling and stop letting social media and culture define ourselves and define our relationships. Let's go back to the basic and how everything was created to be, and that is through the Bible. Literally, this is a instruction of to live a peaceful, joyful life with clarity and peace. We just need to stop listening to others and listen to God more. So now let's go ahead and shift the gears of what is leading the situationships in today's era. And that is obviously through these role confusion that has turned the emotional limbo on. So why are so many women end up in situationships today? And that is because situationships aren't accidental. They are more of a natural outcome of those blurred roles, of those emotional numbness, and that cultural condition that taught women to give far more than men have earned. Okay? So this is rooted in one pattern, and that is giving too much too soon. And you know where I'm gonna go with this, right? It is showing up in small ways that feel normal because the generation that we are in has shaped that. Okay? It's the initiating the first move, planning the date, solving the logistics, giving access to your body without the commitment, offering your emotional support he did not earn, and treating him like a husband when he has not even claimed you. And this is the biggest one that I feel is very important. It's treating him like a husband when he hasn't even claimed you or even earned you, right? We are giving him all of the benefits of a husband, of having a wife, without even, man, some of you not even having a boyfriend and girlfriend label, not even in being in a true commitment in any way, which it just baffles me. Like, we are literally disrespecting ourselves in so many ways by doing this. We are dishonoring our boundaries. We are literally giving ourselves in all of the ways while he gives us nothing. And every one of these actions feel generous, right? That's what we tell ourselves. They're going to end up falling in love with us. False. They are actually removing the very thing that activates the masculine energy pursuit, and that is the effort. A man cannot pursue what is already chasing him, right? He cannot value what requires no investment. He cannot lead where he feels no responsibility, right? And that's where the situationship begins. Not because he didn't like you, but because you carried their relationship before he even had the opportunity to, or even choose you to be in that relationship. So, again, let's lean back into our feminine energy, let him pursue, and let's not give ourselves so easy. He needs to earn our peace. And we've been discussing this in the last few episodes, which has been laying down the foundation to what we're discussing today. And I do want to also bring something up that has caught my attention very recently, and that is the new age love bombing. It's called date stacking. I don't know if you guys have come across this, but I have seen some male TikTokers talk about this. And I found this very interesting. So I really want us to kind of dissect what this is and make sure that we're not falling into this. So basically what it is that a guy will, and I say guy, not man, they will initially show you all of this interest, text you, and it seems like they're very intentional and interested in you. And they will, set up the dates, and they will set up the dates very like almost frequently, like back to back. Because the strategy here is the more dates that they can get in a short period of time, the faster they can start to access that intimacy. And once they get what they are chasing after, which is not really you and that relationship long term, but it's more of your body, to see how far he can get into these date stackings until he seals the deal and then he ghosts you. Or then you fall into a situationship where he just booty calls you whenever, he just needs you and to satisfy him. So I want us to look into this and realize this is not a pursuit. This is not leadership. This is not intentional dating. It's efficiency. It's ego. It's emotional shortcuts. Okay? And this is where the discernment really comes into play and really matters. Right? It's reading those red flags. It's really understanding our intuition and listening to that small little nudge that the Holy Spirit is trying to tell us, right? Because modern dating has mastered the art of manufacturing momentum. And that's something that I recently started to realize. And women who are hungry for connection can mistake that intensity for intention. But here is the simple truth. A man's urgency for intimacy is not a sign of interest, okay? A man's consistency is. Men do not fall in love with intimacy, okay? This is where society has actually misled women to believe. This is just another cultural lie. Women do bond emotionally through intimacy, okay? So that's why I think that we think that, but men do not. They actually connect through that pursuit, that chase, okay? How hard he worked to get you, to earn you. A man falls in love when he invests time, effort, resources, sacrifice, and intention, when he gives it his all. So not when he gains access to your body. So when a woman does the chasing, the planning, the initiating, and when she's giving herself up too soon, this is where she becomes the architect of the connection. She unintentionally disrupts that divine pattern that is created in men to operate in. Okay? So if you chase, you break that divine order. And again, we've discussed about this divine order. We should not be interfering with that. We should just rest in our feminine elegance and peace. And when the divine order breaks, that connection breaks, right? So this is not about manipulation. This is just more about making sure that we are in that alignment that we're called to be in. Because every time a woman steps into a masculine role, the man naturally shifts into that feminine role. So that's why we're stuck here. We pushed so much in the last decades, for women empowerment, for freeing love, for, just no responsibility to act like men in a relationship. And now we flipped the roles and we've observed everything while men do nothing in a relationship. And once the polarity collapses, the relationship enters in that gray zone of the unknown called the situationship. Not because the woman wasn't worthy of that commitment in any way, but because the dynamic was never built on the pursuit, structure, and the masculine leadership. You're already giving him everything in a relationship before even it starts, right? So stop giving up your body so easily. Respect yourself more because you are more empowered, by stepping back and respecting yourself more and your tempo more than giving it up so easily, because they need to start earning your peace and your attention, okay, and your time. Whew. Got a little heated up there, but all right, let's go ahead now and start talking about how discernment, peace, and masculine leadership align. A true masculine, emotionally anchored man is decisive by nature because he doesn't move in circles. He doesn't need months to figure things out. He doesn't operate out of a place of confusion or emotional ambiguity. He usually, by the first 10 minutes of meeting that woman, he already has a directional sense. Not because he's judging her, but because masculine men are wired for evaluation, vision, and clarity. He's not asking surface level questions. Is she pretty? Is she fun? He's asking deeper questions. Can I provide for her? Does she respect the role I naturally step in? Can I protect her? Does she move with wisdom, discernment, and emotional maturity? Can she nurture the future that we build? Does she create warmth, stability, and spiritual alignment? Right? So a masculine man thinks generationally. A feminine man thinks situationally. This is why a grounded men don't entertain chaos. They look for a woman whose energy is peaceful and not performative. A woman who communicates interest with warmth and softness, not desperation, fear, or pursuit. Which this is, again, everything that we've been talking about and creating a creature like no other. We want to embrace that full feminine energy through our peace, through our nurturing aspects. How are we carrying ourselves and how we're showing up in dating, and how are we honoring our boundaries, right? So women often overestimate how much they need to prove the interest, but men who are in their masculine leadership don't need theatrics. If she's responding, engaging, receptive, kind, soft, loving, he knows she's interested. That's all a healthy man needs. So when a man says, I didn't know if you liked me, or I don't want to put myself out there, that man is confused and he's embracing his most feminine energy. That's not masculinity at all. And that's not his masculine energy leading him in any way. And a man who moves like this is signaling, I want to be chosen but not challenged. I want comfort but not responsibility. I want certainty but without any effort. And that is not a man who's ready to build anything. And I really hope that you don't want to build a future with that man or think that you can, because you're going to be building it on your own while he's just relaxing on the couch. Because a man who fears rejection more than his desire, you know that he's just not ready to lead, and there's still some molding that God needs to do there. A masculine man embraces risk. They initiate, they pursue, they move toward the woman they desire with intention, consistency, and confidence. If he is more afraid of that rejection that is driving him to pursue you, then he is not masculine at all. He isn't in the emotional self-protection. That is not husband energy. That is boy energy, actually, with adult responsibilities. The masculine energy decides. It's decisive. And the feminine energy responds to that masculine decisiveness and pursuit. This is the divine polarity that creates the chemistry, the momentum, and the stability. The masculine moves first. The feminine sets the tone. The masculine leads. The feminine nurtures. When this order is honored, clarity comes quickly. When it's reversed, women end up waiting for months for a decision that a grounded man would make in days, right? And then we are getting stuck again in a situationship. So let's not chase your soft energy guys, because trust me, even though the connection might be there, the chemistry might be there, or you may think that's what you want, long term, it's not going to emotionally satisfy you in any way. And it's not going to bring you any clarity at all. It's only going to keep bringing you confusion. You're not going to be at peace, and you're going to be asking yourself why. So now let's dive in to ghosting and why men ghost. So ghosting, again, is not going to be a reflection about you and your worth, but it's more a reflection about his character, his emotional capacity, and his intentional alignment. When a man disappears without honesty, closure, or accountability, it's not because you weren't good enough. It's because he lacked that maturity to communicate like a masculine man. All right? So here are some real reasons men ghost, and these are just very common reasons. He's dating other women, right? He was never actually exclusive. He was exploring his options. You weren't the only connection that he was nurturing, and he just didn't have the confidence and the honorable characteristic to tell you that. Secondly, he probably went back to his ex. Many men retreat to familiarity, to comfortability when they feel overwhelmed or when emotional depth is actually required. And then thirdly, you weren't his first choice. Harsh but truth. Some men keep women in rotation while pursuing their top picks, right? So we've talked about not accepting last minute dates, right? So if we start honoring ourselves more and our time more, we can start to disqualify these types of situations or that we can end up in when dating and ghosting. So like we've discussed in previous episode, we need to stay busy, and we should not be accepting last minute dates and because you're his last minute thought, because he probably, got rejected by the woman that he actually wanted to go out on a date with, or he just had nothing better to do that date because that weekend because his buddies are out of town, or they're all busy or married or whatever the situation may be. And then he also avoids confrontation. So ending things requires emotional responsibility. So ghosting is the easier path for them, for the least resistance of that emotional maturity in a man. And then he also just lacks communication skills. Some men never learn how to express discomfort, boundaries, or disinterest. Attachment avoidance is another reason. Avoidant men feel intimacy as pressure, not connection. And so when that emotion starts to deepen, they dip out. And then he is conflict phobic. Any possibility of disappointing you or having a hard conversations triggers withdrawal, right? So these are just some common things of why men ghost. And let's be very clear. Even though this could be the reasons why they're ghosting you, we should not be okay with, accepting this at all, because it is dishonorable, right? He is not respecting you. It's not a norm that we should keep normalizing in modern dating today. It's not just how things are now. Ghosting is just showing emotional immaturity, lack of that masculine integrity, absence of accountability, and avoidance of responsibility. A masculine man, a man grounded in purpose, self-respect, and leadership communicates even when it's uncomfortable, right? He closes the door and does not leave any doors cracked. So now let's talk a little bit about a man's timeliness and commitment when you are dating. So modern dating has created an endless talking stages, right? So you're talking on forever, then you're going on date. It's just really starting to blur the lines of that, dating journey and timeline and how that should look like. But masculine men who are serious of how they're moving in dating, they do it with clarity and with a certain pace. And usually the masks drops around month 6 and 7 when you are dating. So that's when the pattern really becomes visible. Inconsistency starts to show, the emotional immaturity reveals itself, true character begins to surface. And if you are dating a narcissist, they can usually hold up a mask for up to 18 months. And this is why women with strong discernment win, because feminine intuition is the first line of defense. And we really unpacked all of this in our last episode about discernment and red flags. And, being in a toxic relationship through control, because men that are controlling has some sort of narcissistic tendency. And I opened up about my last relationship, which I generally think he was borderline narcissistic. Not my last relationship, but my second to last relationship. He was definitely borderline narcissistic. And, I definitely fell for it for a year and a half, though, that 18 months when his mask really came down and I saw him for who he was. And I was like, what am I doing here? And I dipped out. So now let's go ahead and talk about the timeline of the optimal engagement window. The emotionally healthy, financially stable adults in their 30s. By 1 year, a man knows your value, your character, your lifestyle, your temperament, your spiritual alignment, if he can build that future with you. And a masculine man will not wait 5 years to figure it out. They will move with direction, okay? So if you are in a 5-year relationship with no actual commitment, girl, you got to step back and really reevaluate if that man is actually meant for you, which I think you kind of got already your answer if you're questioning it all after listening to this episode. And if you haven't seen last episode, I would highly suggest looking at that last episode on red flags. But anyways, the hard truth is that long stagnant relationships are just your biggest red flags. 3, 4, 5, 6 years in, no proposal, no clear timeline, no forward movement. You're not building a future. You're maintaining access. At that point, you're basically in a glorified situationship. Okay? It's comfortable, it's familiar, it's convenient, but there is no clear end goal of that relationship. Okay? And a woman in her feminine energy does not wait indefinitely. A man who honors you will not ask you to. So, again, respect your boundaries, really step back, pray to God to give you that clarity, that discernment, that answer of what you should do next if you are in a relationship like this. And if you are unease and there's confusion and there's no peace and you're still feeling anxious, that is your answer. That's God's giving you. God answers your prayer through discomfort. Remember that. If he's not giving you peace, he's telling you to start shifting those goals and objective in life, and especially in that relationship. All right, so now let's go ahead and discuss where to focus your energy while dating. Because as we know, modern dating has created a lot of noise, a lot of overstimulation, and a lot of emotional fatigue. So in order to start dating from a place of clarity, we need to have a scalable energy strategy. And one that prioritizes the alignment over the attention and discernment over desperation. The blueprint is very simple, but the execution really requires discipline. All right, so here's the framework. 25-25-50. This approach ensures you're leading with intention, not impulsiveness. So 25% of your energy should be going into apps, social media. It's that digital effort. Use the apps as a pipeline, not a lifestyle. Treat them like a sourcing tool, not a source of emotional validation. And dating apps operate like a marketplace per se. They're high volume, low accountability, gamified behavior, instant gratification, and minimal investments. So this environment really conditions people to become more disposable. And the quality men can be on apps, but they have not been living on them. They check in and check out. Your operational mindset is short sessions, clear criteria, filters aligned with your standards, no emotional over investments, right? So this digital touch point should support your dating life, not consume it. And I know how draining it is to be on dating apps. I honestly, at first when I got it, it's like, it always starts like that. We invest so much energy thinking this is the way that we're going to meet someone, but we're holding on to hope that we're going to meet them naturally. But now I'm like, you know what? And there was a point where I just deleted it and I was like, I got over it. And then I re-downloaded it. So I check on it periodically. I spend maybe like 10 to 30 minutes a day on a dating app. Not much. And if a date comes out of it, cool. And if it doesn't, cool. Like I'm not living off of it. It's just supporting my life, my dating lifestyle. All right. And then 25% is just real world environment, right? So putting yourself out there in social events, and mutual connections as well. So third party connections, like I talked about earlier. So this is where we meet men who are moving, not scrolling, men who are active, present, and engaged in the real life, which already starts to demonstrate that masculine trait without saying a word. The high yield environment will include fitness communities, young professional groups, church or faith-based gatherings, volunteer teams, networking events, workshop or skill-based classes, and then activity clubs, right? Best way to meet single men nowadays is pickleball. Apparently that's just the new sport. Hiking, running, cycling. If you love running, do run clubs. That's how people are also meeting each other. So get yourself out there, involve yourself in clubs or activities, and fill up your calendar with stuff like this. These spaces naturally just reveal the character, how he interacts with others, how he's carrying himself, whether he's consistent, whether he shows initiative. These real world encounters start to accelerate the authenticity that you cannot see through a dating app. And then 50% should be through faith, healing, and alignment with God. Okay? This is the core of the entire strategy. If you don't anchor in God first, you'll anchor in the attention, in the attraction, or in that emotional fantasy. And the work that actually moves your love life forward will be through prayer, through discernment, through community, through accountability, healing those childhood wounds and traumas, which we'll definitely be unpacking on other episodes, releasing your soul ties, identifying relationship patterns, building your emotional and spiritual and mental stability. This is how you position what you're choosing and starting to attract those things. And you're going to start not chasing things, right? When your spirit is aligned, you start to sharpen your standards, your discernment starts to strengthen, your patience starts to increase, your boundaries are being held more honorably, Your intuition becomes a lot more clearer. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. God's order creates relational order, and that includes with yourself. So with all of that being said, where your energy creates the most return is going to be by attracting a high value men, right? So masculine, decisiveness, intentional, show up in environments that require commitment, discipline, and consistency. And that is the foundation that you're starting to lay by structuring your energy in the 25-25-50, right? Daytime environments give the clear read on his lifestyle, his habits, his value, his demeanor, his natural leadership qualities. And the nightlife gives you the chemistry, and day life gives you the clarity, right? So now let's discuss more on how we should be selecting our men now that we've talked about the dividing our energy and time. So this is going to be a major maturity pivot, because this is what I see a lot of females fall very victim to, and I myself, which I've had to reshift my mindset in how I'm going about my dating when it comes to choosing, right? So it's not about being picky, which I see a lot of women falling into, right? Because being picky is rooted in fear. Fear is choosing wrong. Fear is for vulnerability, fear of intimacy. It becomes a decisiveness mechanism disguised as I just know what I want, right? So having standards that is rooted in clarity, it's grounded, it's thoughtful, it's healthy. The formula is very simple, okay? We should just be rooting ourselves not by being picky, but having non-negotiables, and we should have those non-negotiable be top 5 non-negotiables that you should pick from, and it should not be physical, but more characteristic aspects, right? So examples of those are: he must be God-fearing. That's number 1 for me. He must be consistent in his actions. He must desire commitment. He must be emotionally stable. He must be financially responsible. Huge for me as well. Everything else is preference, right? Not purpose. Too many criterias will sabotage your connection. And by dissecting it down to 5 non-negotiables of characteristics for you, that will create more alignment, okay? So the bottom line is, when you balance your effort with 25%, and you align it with the 50% of that faith-based, you stop dating from scarcity, right? And start dating from strength. You move from I hope to be chosen to I'm evaluating if he aligns with my calling. You move from emotional reactiveness to strategic discernment. And you position yourself not just for a relationship, but for a kingdom of partnership. Okay? So now that we've kind of started to dive in a little bit more about your structure in dating and what we should be looking for through non-negotiables, now let's go ahead and talk about how to not settle for less and dating down, and identifying these red flags that are very common. So now I want to be clear, dating down is not about money, status, or lifestyle. It's more about alignment, maturity, and the direction that you guys are going. When you are dating a man beneath your emotional, spiritual, or purpose-driven caliber, you don't lower your standards, you compromise your calling. Okay? So watch for that potential, which is so easy to fall into a trap of, because potential is a projection. It's who he could be with discipline, healing, and leadership. But a man's potential is irrelevant if he has no plan, no pace, and no personal accountability. A man reveals his truth through consistency, follow through, self-discipline, vision, emotional responsibility, if he is not demonstrating these right now, he's telling you exactly who he is and all you really need to know. So believe the data in front of you, okay? If he keeps you in a space of grayness, if he keeps you as a placeholder, he is not a man with intentionality. A man who wants you will lead you towards clarity, not confusion. And signs of that misalignment that is very common is 3 months and still no relationship. He's not undecided. He's just uncommitted. He texts, but he doesn't plan. He likes access, but not the responsibility. He talks about the future, but takes no steps. He likes the fantasy, but not the reality and the true responsibility. A masculine man closes the gap between interest and action. A passive man leaves you in that limbo. And if he moves too fast, evaluate those patterns, right? We've already kind of touched on this. Love bombing is not leadership. Urgency is not commitment. Intensity is not intentionality. If he accelerates that intimacy, attachment, or future talk within days or weeks, check on a few things. Does he do this with everyone? Does he sustain his space? And is the emotional hunger genuine or not? And that discernment is where it comes in, and you can start protecting your space by allowing the Holy Spirit to speak through you through that discernment. And some of the other red flags that we need to dive in deep and start to analyze, and these are just common red flags that I'm going to point out, okay? So number 1, he's addicted to video games. This is escapism, avoidance, lack of real world ambition. A man's hobbies shouldn't be replaced by drive. Okay, it's okay if he wants an hour or 2 to play video games and unplug. That's fine, right? It's like hanging out with his buddies virtually. Like, that is completely fine. But if it is consuming him and taking that quality time away from you, then that is a huge red flag. And then 2, lives with his mom in his 30s. Ooh, that's a big one. It's not about location, but it's more about elevation, right? If there's no plan to move forward, you'll become the plan, right? He has no passion. And that is very dangerous ground to go into. You don't want to become his hobby or his passion. And 3, no long-term relationship history. This is another big one, right? No track record means no proof of emotional endurance or relational accountability. So if he does not ever been in a serious relationship, that is a huge red flag there. There's still a lot of work to do in that guy to turn into a masculine man. And then 4, I don't believe in labels. That is a translation of I don't want to be in a relationship and want all of the benefits of it because I don't want the responsibility of them. And that's a very common one that we see a lot, right? Oh, I don't believe in labels. Like, we're doing so well. Why put labels to it and complicate things? Then you should walk out, and it's probably because you're giving him everything before he earned it. 5, watches your stories but never texts. Now, I've never come across this, but I know this is something that, a lot of female fall into. This is just basically passive engagement, right? It's just digital breadcrumbs. He likely is keeping you as a option. There's just no future partnership there, so just give up on that. 6, wants your Instagram but not your number. Oh gosh, I really dislike this when they're asking for your social media and not for your number. He just wants access to your image and not your life. So no, that's a red flag for me too. And then 7, this is a big one. debt with no plan. The issue is not that he's in debt, because many of us can be in debt. Thankfully, I'm not. But it's just shows that his lack of discipline, structure, and ownership, right? So if he is just going through life day by day, there's no plan. It's also just showing a lot of just that lack of discipline and financial literacy, to be honest. And I don't want that to be the one leading my family. So 8, doesn't want to post you. I mean, if this isn't a very clear red flag, girl, and you're still with him, yeah, you got a few things to evaluate with yourself. But basically, it is what it is. It's your secret, right? He's protecting something, and it's usually his options, or who knows. Nowadays, like, they're balancing multiple girlfriends because we're giving it to them too easily without earning them. Number 9, a best friend female. Okay, so this could be a hot take, right? So I personally don't want to be involved with someone that has a best friend that is a female, because when you're in a relationship, and especially in a marriage, I should be your best female friend, and you should be my best male friend. I don't have best friends that are males. I have buddies, yeah, but they're not like my best friends. I don't come to them for issues. I don't, it's not that. We just interact in social events kind of aspect, right? I mean, the closest thing to a male best friend, I guess, will be my guy cousins and my brothers. Those are the males in my life. So basically, it's an emotional triangulation. If she's the emotional anchor, he doesn't need intimacy with you. It's gonna hinder that connection and that openness that he needs to open up with you, especially in the relationship. Because if he's going to another female about your guys' relationship, like, instead of you, like, excuse me? No. So that'd be something that you really need to look into, because again, like, female and male will end up falling for one another if it's not one or the other. And I see a lot of like stories out there of, just they're married years and years, but there's something going on with the female friend. There's, that female like discernment that we know something is off. And sometimes male might be completely faithful and oblivious that the female friend is completely head over heels them and is trying to sabotage. Like, I just see so many stories like that on the internet. It's just like, man, this is why we need to set stricter boundaries. And true masculine men will agree with this. 10, avoids talking about past relationship. This is an avoidance. It signals wounds, patterns, and accountability problems, and that means that he still has a lot of healing to do. 11, can't plan dates. Leadership is shown through initiative, right? So if he can't plan a date, he's embracing his most feminine energy. If you're always the one projecting, managing the relationship, he's not leading, he's following, and you should go, thank you next. 12, poor communication. A man who can't express himself cannot build partnership, resolve conflicts, or foster intimacy, and then ghosts you. So yeah, no, that's a red flag. He either will work on it with you intentionally. And if you want to look at, if you are in a relationship or dating someone seriously and you really want to work through these communication, because I know that as females, just as a generational phenomenon, we just suck at communication. There's a really good book called Crucial Conversations, which I highly recommend you looking it up, because it does talk about how to go about conversations in relationships. It breaks down different aspects: business, relationship, friendships, all of that fun stuff. So I highly recommend you looking into that and into that book for those crucial conversations. And then the best book that you can read about communication and all of that stewardship, well, it is the Bible. All right, and then 13, no vision for his life. If he has no vision for his life, how can he have a vision for your guys' future? A man without direction, it will derail your direction, your future, your alignment. Okay, because then you're gonna try and fit into his alignment, because us women, sometimes, I swear, We can just be too emotionally driven and compassionate, and that's the thing, right? Oh, all right. All right, so now let's go ahead and dive into something more positive, and that is green flags and identifying those traits, right? The traits that will signal a man that is operating in that healthy masculinity, in that emotional maturity, and that long-term partnership and readiness. And these are not just a nice to have. These are the core pillars of a man who can lead, protect, and build, and that you should really be looking out for. So, contrary to what we've been talking about with red flags, the number one thing we should be looking for in a man is a man with a plan, right? So this is the number one green flag, right? A man with a vision, a man with direction. He knows what he wants. He's going to pursue you, you know, where he's going. He knows what he's doing. He has a true vision and alignment of what his future is going to look like, because a man with plan automatically operates with discipline, structure, and purpose. And you cannot build a life with someone who is building nothing. That does not give you security, right? Because a man is supposed to make you feel safe, secure, right? But so a man without a plan, without that foundation, like how are you sure where is this future going? 2, he's family oriented, right? Not the I love my mom, okay? So we don't want mama's boys or the ones living in their mom's basements at 30. But I know how to show up for my family, create legacy, and build community kind of man, right? A man who treasures family would treasure the family he builds with you. So family man. Number 3, he likes animals. It's not random. It's about compassion, it's gentleness, it's patientness, and emotional softness that he's going to be showing by, owning a dog or having a pet. So men who show care in small things often show care in those bigger things. And then 4, has culture. Culture means grounding, identity, values, respects for tradition, and understanding of who he is and where he comes from. Okay? A man without culture often lacks those roots and is very confused in his own life and will cause confusion in yours. A husband needs to be rooted, okay? So he can build branches, okay? And then 5, has hobbies. A masculine man needs outlets. Hobbies are good, okay? Hobbies show self-sufficiency, balance, emotional regulation, healthy independence. A man with nothing going on will cling, drain, and distract themselves with unhealthy habits, and we don't want that. And number 6, discipline with his health. And like we've talked about, this is very important even with us, right? Because disciplining in the body reflects discipline in the mind and the spirit. Healthy habits reveal self-control, consistency, long-term thinking, the ability to provide stability, right? So a man cannot lead a household if he cannot lead himself. And then 7, consistency. Consistency is the backbone of a masculine leadership. It tells you you're safe here, I follow through, I am not going anywhere. If you have to guess, wonder, and overthink, you're not with a consistent man. Okay, he is not creating a place of clarity for you. He has you on a guessing game, and that's not good. And then 8, emotional stability. Emotional stability means he can communicate with clarity, regulate his reactions, apologize, navigate conflict, pursue long-term partnership without chaos. This is usually one of the most underrated husband qualities. And then 9, financial responsibility. Again, this is not about being rich. It's about stewardship, strategy, accountability, and delayed gratification. A financial responsibility in a man knows how to build and protect that household, and it's someone that I can trust, right? And 10, spiritual leadership. Very important. This is the anchor. A man led by God is a man who can lead a family. Spiritual leadership looks like wisdom, discernment, emotional covering, prayer, alignment with purpose. A man who is rooted in faith will build a relationship rooted in peace. How can we start to identify these certain red flags or green flags in the man that we are currently dating or starting to date? So let's talk about some dating questions. And this is not about interrogation in any way. This is just more to have an alignment checkpoint. So you're not dating for, again, vibes. You're dating for clarity. These questions just essentially reveal a lot of the intentionalities and maturities of a man and his intentions more immediately, so you're not wasting your time. So some good questions to ask. What is your plan for us? A masculine man will have an answer. A passive man will avoid, deflect, and deliver just passiveness and confusion. This question forces him to articulate the direction, his intentions, and his pace. And if he can't reply, then he's just not ready. And then second, what are your intentions, right? This is simply direct. A man who wants you will welcome the opportunity to be clear. A man who wants access, not commitment, will fall apart right then and there. Okay? And then number 3, how do you handle conflict? This is where emotional maturity reveals itself. Look for accountability, communication, problem solving, emotional intelligence. So men who avoid conflict often avoid commitment, right? Number 4, where do you see life in 5 years? This question exposes vision, values, ambition, structure, readiness for partnership. And you can't align your future with a man that doesn't have a plan again, right? All right, so some hot takes is, when should we be asking these questions? So let's go ahead and keep it just strategical. Date 1, this is just to kind of test that connection, that chemistry, more of the surface level aspect. Again, you want to be mysterious and not reveal too much, right? And you're evaluating that energy, the presence, the leadership, the compatibility, and just very surface level kind of date, right? And that will be also on date 2. And then we can start getting a little bit more deep on date 3 and 4. You know, you can start bringing in the question, you know, where do you see yourself in 5-year kind of aspect? And then on date 4 and 5, maybe start diving in a little bit deeper, right? On all of those questions that we went over. And then some hot take questions that people, you know, don't know when to ask is going to be around faith, value, worldviews, politics, lifestyle, alignment. And I think these are very important conversations to have, especially maybe towards date 4 and 5, because by this point, I mean, you're going to obviously start getting a lot of these answers if you're really navigating those other dates strategically and, you know, really starting to see him through a lens of discernment. But these are just very foundational stuff that we should be aligning in, right? When looking in that partner. So bottom line, green flags tell you not just who a man is, but what kind of life he can build, right? Your job is not to fix a man or elevate a man. Your job is to partner up with a man who's already operating at that level that you have been praying for and coming into alignment. All right, I know that we've been unpacking a lot. But again, at the end of the day, your future husband is not discovered through pressure, panic, or striving. He's more revealed through that spiritual alignment, the alignment of your discipline, your healing, your standards, your femininity, and most important, the relationship you have with God. Your future spouse is already in God's hand. Your job is not to chase the outcome. Your job is to become the woman you're called to be. So pray over him. Pray over his character, his leadership, his growth, his walk with God. Pray. Pray over the timing. Pray over the divine clarity and discernment. And rest confidence that God is orchestrating what you cannot see. You don't need to force the divine connection. You just need to prepare yourself for it and just keep walking in God's alignment. And when the time is right, God will reveal what He has been reserving for you. All right. If this episode spoke to you, shifted your mindset, or just poured into your spirit, go ahead and subscribe. Share the episode to someone that you know will also pour into. The more that you support and the more that you share, the more hearts that we can reach. So subscribe to YouTube. I'm also on Apple Podcast and Spotify, Rewriting Romance, Modern Dating with Old School Wisdom. And then you can also just follow along on social media where I get a little personal and just go through some, faith-based wisdom and just navigating dating in real time with me. So don't forget to hit that follow button or subscribe button, and also just like and comment. That also really, really helps reach more hearts. So, and until next time, stay grounded in faith, rooted in grace, and become the woman that God has designed you to be.